My sister hasn't left her room for 2 months. After I opened her door, I found out why. I hate talking about it with people. It annoys me how my sister acts. She was the worst sister I could ever ask for. That is, until I opened her door. Throughout both of our childhoods we were inseparable. We played and hung out together all the time. Things were happy. It all changed when I was 11, when I was diagnosed with leukemia. From what I've heard, Rachel was practically forgotten by my family. My parents constantly visited me in the hospital, staying by my side during the majority of my chemotherapy. Even when they were at home with Rachel, they still only thought and talked about me. Sister's face as she saw me in the hospital bed. The first time she saw me, she looked distraught. It must have been hard seeing your own sibling in a state like this. As more and more visits went on, the expression on her face had changed. Her face looked hard to read, almost like she had something on her mind. I didn't think much of it at the time. Thankfully, I quickly went into remission and have been cancer-free for around 5 years. The whole family was thrilled, including Rachel. Not long after I was released from the hospital, my parents revealed to us that they were having some financial trouble and would both be having to go back to work. I was 11. My sister was 13, so they trusted us to be home alone. I'll never forget Rachel's face when they told us. She looked absolutely crushed. It was from then on that our relationship seemed to change. Rachel became distant and withdrawn. She was quicker to anger and didn't seem to want to be around me. At the time, I figured it was part of her becoming a teenager. While this behavior continued for the next 5 years, it was only around 3 months ago when her behavior began to get stranger. It started after she finished her senior year of high school. One summer break began, she started spending much more time in her room. Her bedroom is on the basement floor of the house, so she always has her privacy. Not long after school ended, I began to notice some odd signs. I remember sitting on the couch watching television. Rachel wasn't home, and my parents were out working. When Rachel came home, she was carrying some sort of container. I couldn't tell what was inside, since it was covered by a white sheet. I asked her what it was, but she told me loud and clear that it was none of my business. She brought the mysterious container down into her bedroom. She then came back upstairs, back outside to her car, and came in with another container, still covered by a white sheet. She continued this a few more times, coming back with more covered containers. At this point I was extremely curious, but I didn't want to upset her by asking again. Once she finished retrieving the containers, she went back to her car and returned with more stuff. This time she came back with many bags of food and bottled water. All of the foods were non-perishables, like bread, canned goods and crackers. Finally she went downstairs and locked the door. I was confused, but I wasn't very concerned. I began to get alarmed the next day when she still hadn't left her room at all. I knocked on her door, hearing her shout for me to go away. I tried pulling it open, but it wouldn't budge. I must have did something to lock it from the inside. Eventually my parents got concerned too. They tried to open the door, but Rachel convinced them not to care. She told them that she was an adult and that she had food and water to sustain herself. They gave in, not wanting to argue after a long day of work. I however refused to give up. Every day I tried to convince her to get out, but she always yelled at me to go away. Finally, about a month later, I gave up. Another month went by and Rachel still hadn't left her room. None of us tried to get her out since we knew she would just end up yelling at us. During the night, my mind would often wander and think about Rachel. As time went on, my thoughts became more and more paranoid, and I began to get worried. It was around the 2-month mark when I decided enough was enough. I woke up early that morning and couldn't fall back asleep. My parents were working, and it was just me and Rachel at home. I silently crept down the stairs and walked towards the door to Rachel's room. I knocked gently. Silence. I knocked harder, but still got no response. I tried calling her name, but was still met with silence. I continued to knock, eventually banging at the door. Getting really scared, I put my ear to the door and noticed something. I heard a noise that sounded like a muffled buzzing.